My name is Anya Sharma, and at 31 years old, I am a captain in the United States Army Special Forces. My family, the Sharmas of Sharma Global Ventures, once told me I was throwing my life away on a childish fantasy. On the day I enlisted, they held a gathering not to celebrate, but to formally sever ties, declaring that I was dead to them. For 10 long years, that silence was absolute. Then one Tuesday morning, they called me from the insulated quiet of their penthouse suite, their voices stripped of all their old arrogance, begging me to go to hell and back to save the very empire they had chosen over me. And the most beautifully, terribly ironic part of it all, I was already there, living and breathing in the smoke and chaos at the gates of the hell they wanted me to enter. They had no idea that the world they feared most had become the only place I truly felt at home. Before I dive into the full story of how a bitter family fallout led to a deniable covert operation in the heart of a war zone, I'd love to know where all of you are watching from today. Go ahead and drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you've ever been underestimated or told you weren't good enough, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps stories like mine find the people who need to hear them the most. And for any new viewers, make sure you subscribe to join this incredible community of people who understand that sometimes the path you forge for yourself is the only one that matters. The memory of that day was preserved in amber, perfect and painful. I was 18, standing on the Persian rug in my father's study, a room that smelled of old leather, Cuban cigars, and disappointment. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken expectations, a pressure I had felt since I could walk. Outside the tall windows, the manicured lawns of our Connecticut estate rolled away, a perfect green carpet insulated from an imperfect world. Inside, the world was about to shatter. I had just told them I had enlisted in the United States Army. Not as an officer through West Point, which they might have just barely stomached as a networking opportunity, but as a private. I wanted to earn my place from the ground up. My father, Vikram Sharma, sat behind his massive mahogany desk, a desk carved from a single ancient tree, much like the Sharma family legacy was supposedly carved from a single unbroken line of commercial genius. He didn't yell. He never yelled. His anger was a cold, precise thing, like a surgeon's scalpel. He slowly placed his crystal glass of whiskey down, the sound echoing in the funereal silence of the room. The army, he said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth, is a last resort for people with no other options. We gave you an empire, Anya. We gave you the world, and you choose to go play in the dirt with them. He couldn't even bring himself to say the word soldiers. My mother, Priya, stood near the fireplace, twisting a silk scarf in her hands. Her face was a mask of practiced sorrow, the kind she wore when a business deal went south or a society rival snubbed her at a gala. Her tears were real, I suppose, but they weren't for me. They were for the disruption of her perfect family portrait. Anya, darling, think of the scandal, she whispered, her voice trembling. What will people say? The daughter of Vikram Sharma, a common grunt. But it was my brother, Rohan, whose reaction cut the deepest. He was 2 years older, the golden child, the heir apparent already installed in a corner office at Sharma Global Ventures, his Wharton MBA framed and hanging on the wall before the ink was even dry. He lounged in a leather armchair, a smug, pitying smile on his face. Let her go, father, he said, his voice smooth and condescending. She has to get this little rebellion out of her system. She'll come crawling back in a year, begging for her trust fund. He looked at me then, his eyes full of a strange mix of triumph and disdain. He had finally, definitively won. The family business, the name, the legacy, it was all his. I was abdicating my claim. My father's gaze hardened. He stood up, his posture ramrod straight, the patriarch of a dynasty passing judgment. Rohan is wrong, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. You will not come crawling back, because there will be nothing to come back to. If you walk out that door today, you are no longer a Sharma. The name, the money, the family, it is all forfeit. You will be a ghost to us. Do you understand me? I looked from his cold, implacable face to my mother's tear-streaked one, to my brother's triumphant smirk. And in that moment, I saw my future laid out if I stayed. A life sentence in a gilded cage, my wings clipped, my voice silenced, forever measured against Rohin and found wanting. The choice was no choice at all. My throat was tight, but my voice came out steady, clearer than I thought possible. I understand. I didn't say goodbye. I just turned, walked out of the study, and pulled the heavy oak door closed behind me. The solid, definitive thud of the latch clicking into place was the sound of my old life ending and my new one beginning. I walked down the long, marbled hallway, past the portraits of my ancestors and out into the world, utterly and completely alone. 10 years later, that solitude had been reforged into a different kind of strength. I was sitting in a cramped, makeshift intelligence hub at a forward operating base in a country bordering the volatile nation of Zaristan. The air smelled of burnt coffee, ozone from the servers, and the faint, dusty scent of the desert outside. This was my study now. My family wasn't the one that shared my blood, but the one that shared my watch. Master Sergeant Sarge Jackson, a man whose face was a roadmap of a dozen forgotten conflicts, sat across from me, cleaning his rifle with a patient, methodical calm that I always found grounding. He'd been my mentor since I first made it into the teams, a steady presence who saw potential in the angry, driven young woman I was. Anything new on the wire, Gia? I asked, looking over at Sergeant Mateo, Gia Diaz. Gia was our tech and intelligence wizard, a blur of motion and caffeine who could pull satellite imagery and human intelligence from the ether like a magician pulling rabbits from a hat. He had a network of local contacts that was the envy of every intelligence agency in the region. Just more of the same, Cap, he said, not looking up from his 3 screens. The Zaristani government is a house of cards in a hurricane. Rebel factions are consolidating in the north and south. The capital, Kavad, is looking more like a cage match every day. My sources say the embassy is drawing up evacuation plans for essential personnel. It's gonna pop. It's just a matter of when. Corporal Doc Chun, our team medic and breacher, was leaning against the doorframe, field stripping a medkit. Good. This place gives me the creeps. Let it pop, so we can go somewhere with decent plumbing. Sarge chuckled, a low rumble. Patience, document. The world's always got another cesspool for us to wade into. No need to rush. Their easy banter was the soundtrack of my life. These men, Sarge with his quiet wisdom, Jia with his restless brilliance, Chun with his gallows humor and steady hands, they knew me better than my own family ever had. They had seen me at my worst, covered in mud and blood, and at my best, leading them through impossible situations. They didn't care about my last name or my defunct trust fund. They cared if I could make the right call under fire. Here, my worth wasn't inherited. It was earned every single day. The when came 2 days later. It wasn't a slow burn, it was an explosion. A coordinated rebel assault overwhelmed the loyalist army forces in Kavad. The president fled the country. The government didn't just collapse, it evaporated. The news channels lit up with frantic reports. The capital was a war zone. The airport was overrun, the runways cratered. All land borders were sealed. Zaristan had gone dark. We were put on high alert, but our mandate was clear: observe and report. Do not engage unless American lives at the embassy were under direct threat. The country was now a no-go zone, a black hole on the map. For 3 days, the world watched the chaos unfold. For me, it was a distant problem, another geopolitical crisis to monitor. Sharma Global Ventures didn't even cross my mind. I hadn't thought about them in years, not really. The wound had scarred over, a numb patch of tissue where a vital organ used to be. I had compartmentalized that part of my life, locked it in a lead-lined box and buried it deep. But the past has a nasty habit of digging itself up. The call came on a secure, satellite-based line that Jia had rigged for me as a private backchannel. The caller ID was a string of encrypted numbers, but I had a cold feeling in the pit of my stomach. I took the call in a soundproof comms closet. The voice on the other end was one I hadn't heard in a decade, but it was instantly recognizable, even with the crackle of a bad connection and the thick layer of raw panic. Anya? Anya, is that you? Can you hear me? It was my father. The voice that had disowned me, that had declared me a ghost, was now thin and desperate. All the power, all the baritone authority, was gone. "This is Captain Sharma," I replied, my voice flat and professional. It was the only way I could get the words out. "Anya, thank God." He was rambling, the words tumbling over each other. We have a situation. A terrible situation. It's Zaristan. The plant. Of course, the plant. I remembered the press releases from years ago. Sharma Global Ventures had sunk a massive portion of its capital into a state-of-the-art processing facility for rare earth minerals just outside Kavad. My father had called it his legacy project, the Citadel, the crown jewel of his empire. A high-risk, high-reward gamble in an unstable nation. It seemed the risk had finally cashed its check. "The country is in a state of civil war, Vikram," I said, using his first name. It felt strange and powerful. "I'm aware of the situation. The plan is everything, Anya. Our primary asset. It's trapped in rebel-held territory. But that's not the worst part." His voice broke. "There are employees there. 20 of them. American and local staff. They're trapped inside the facility. They barricaded themselves in when the fighting started. We've lost contact." He took a ragged breath. "The plant manager, it's Gupta. Amar Gupta." The name hit me like a physical blow. Mr. Gupta. He had been my father's right-hand man for decades, a kind, gentle soul who, unlike my father, had always had a warm smile for me. When I was a teenager, obsessed with stories of adventure and heroism, he would secretly slip me books on military history and biographies of great leaders, whispering, "A sharp mind is the best weapon, little one." He had seen something in me my own father never had. And he was trapped. "What have you done?" I asked, my mind already shifting into operational mode. "Everything." My father's voice rose in frustration. "We called the State Department. They designated it a level 4, do not travel zone. They said it's too volatile. They can't authorize an official military extraction for private corporate employees. They'll try to negotiate, they said. Negotiate with whom? Anarchists and warlords." He was practically sobbing now. "We tried private contractors, the big ones. They quoted us an astronomical fee, a king's ransom, and then yesterday they all backed out. Every single one. They said the risk profile was unacceptable. They said Kavat is a death trap. No amount of money is worth it, they said." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. The men who live by the ethos that everything has a price had finally found something that wasn't for sale. "Anya, you're there. You're close. You're your unit. You have the skills. You know that part of the world." The contractors said it was impossible, but they aren't you. The desperate plea hung in the air between us. "You are our only hope." My hand was shaking as I ended the call. I walked out of the comms closet and stood staring at the tactical map of Zaristan on the main screen, the city of Kavad blinking red. My mind was a whirlwind of rage and hurt. 10 years of absolute, soul-crushing silence. Not a letter, not a phone call, not even when I was wounded in my first tour. I was a ghost to them. But now their precious empire was on the line, and suddenly the ghost was being asked to perform a miracle. A cold, bitter part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, wanted to let the phone ring unanswered. It wanted to watch them fail. It wanted them to feel the same helpless desperation I had felt standing in that study a lifetime ago. I sat down at my terminal and began typing an email. "Vikram," it began, "your request is denied. The risks are, as your contractors noted, unacceptable. This is the consequence of your choices. You are on your own." My finger hovered over the send button. It would be so easy. One click, and I could have my justice, cold and final. Sarge walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He set one down in front of me without a word, then leaned against the table, watching the map. He hadn't heard the call, but he could read me like a book. "Trouble?" he asked quietly. I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the blinking red dot. "Family," I managed to choke out. "They have assets. In there." He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the map. "Assets. Or people." The question cut through the fog of my anger. He was right. This wasn't about Vikram or Rohan or Sharma Global Ventures. It was about Amar Gupta. It was about 19 other people trapped in a concrete box, waiting for a monster to break down the door. It was about the fundamental principle that had driven me to enlist in the first place. You don't leave people behind. Ever. People, I said, my voice clearing. There are American citizens in there. Employees. Well now, Sarge said, taking a slow sip of his coffee. That changes the conversation, doesn't it? Forget your family for a minute, Captain. What's our duty to them? I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of the monitor. The face staring back wasn't the hurt teenager from Connecticut. It was a Special Forces officer. I deleted the email. My personal feelings didn't matter. The mission was all that mattered. Yeah, I called out, my voice hard and steady now. I need everything you have on a facility called the Citadel, just west of Kavad. Schematics, personnel manifests, current satellite imagery, and any chatter from the ground. I want to know who the local rebel commander is and what he had for breakfast. I need a complete intelligence picture. Now, Jeff's fingers flew across the keyboard. You got it, Cap. The decision was made. The how was still a massive, terrifying question mark, but the why had become crystal clear. This wasn't for them. This was for us. For the next 36 hours, our corner of the FOB became a whirlwind of focused activity. Jeff worked his magic, pulling data from a dozen different sources. He hacked into the Sharma Global Ventures corporate servers with a password I vaguely remembered Rohan using for everything, Golden Boy 1, and downloaded the complete architectural and engineering schematics for the Citadel. He cross-referenced personnel files with State Department records, putting faces and names to the 20 souls trapped inside. The intelligence he gathered from his local sources painted a grim picture. The Citadel was a modern fortress designed to withstand industrial accidents and protests, not a full-scale military assault. It was self-contained, with its own power, water, and several weeks of food supplies, but it was completely isolated. The main rebel faction controlling that sector of Kavad was led by a brutal warlord named Kalin. He was a former Zaristani army colonel who had turned on the government, known for his ruthlessness and his penchant for taking whatever he wanted. The intel suggested Kalin was still busy consolidating his power in the city center, but it was only a matter of time before he turned his attention to the shiny, foreign-owned factory on the hill. The employees weren't just trapped, they were sitting on a prize Kalin would soon come to claim, and they would be seen as nothing more than inconvenient obstacles, or, worse, valuable bargaining chips. The more I learned, the more the mission solidified in my mind. But it couldn't be an official one. My commanding officer would never approve a high-risk incursion into a collapsed state to extract private citizens without a direct order from the Pentagon, and that order would never come. This had to be off the books, deniable, the kind of operation that, if it went wrong, would see us all disavowed, our names scrubbed from the records. It was career suicide at best, a literal suicide mission at worst. I couldn't order my men to do it. I gathered them in the small, windowless briefing room. The tactical map of Kavad was projected on the wall, the citadel circled in red. I laid it all out for them, holding nothing back. I told them about the call, about my family, about the official channels being closed. Here's the situation, I began, my voice even. There are 20 civilians, including several Americans, trapped in that facility. The State Department can't get to them. The cavalry is not coming. I am formulating a plan to go in and get them out. I paused, meeting each of their eyes. But I need to be crystal clear. This will not be an official mission. We will be using our accumulated leave. We will be ghosts. We will have no official support, no air cover, no quick reaction force if things go sideways. If we are captured or killed, the United States government will deny any knowledge of our existence. This is a volunteer-only operation. I am going in, even if I have to go alone. But I will not order any of you to go with me. You all have families, lives. There is no shame in saying no. The room was silent for a long moment. Sarge was the first to speak. He didn't even hesitate. He just folded his arms across his chest and gave me a slight nod. We're with you, Captain. Always have been. Just spun one of his data tablets on the table. A halo jump, a little light treason, and a brawl with a third world warlord? Sounds like my kind of vacation. I'm in. Chin looked from me to the others, a slow grin spreading across his face. What? And let you guys have all the fun. Besides, someone's got to be there to patch you idiots up. Count me in. A wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. This was family. Not blood, but bond. Forged in fire and loyalty. All right, I said, my voice thick. Then let's get to work. Yeah, I need an infiltration plan. High altitude. Low opening jump seems like our best bet. Find us a drop zone in the hills, at least 10 clicks out from the city. I want a sterile, untraceable insertion. Already on it, Cap, he said. The terrain to the east is rugged. Good cover for an overland approach. I also have a contact, a guy named Tarek. Former informant. He's still in the city, laying low. For the right price, he can get us gear. Civilian vehicle, local clothes, maybe some extra firepower that doesn't scream U.S. Army. The price, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. That's the one thing my family is still good for. The next call to my father was different. I was no longer the supplicant. I was the commander. I convened a video conference with him and Rohan. They appeared on the screen, looking haggard and sleepless, their tailored suits seeming out of place against the backdrop of their sterile, panicked existence. I have a plan, I stated without preamble. And I have a team. We are going in. A flicker of relief on my father's face. But Rohan, ever the arrogant fool, couldn't help himself. It's about time. What took you so long? Do you have any idea what we're losing every day that plant is offline? A cold fury, sharp and pure, cut through me. I leaned into the camera, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. Let me make something perfectly clear to you, Rohan. You are not my client. You are not my boss. And you are in no position to ask me for anything. I am not doing this for Sharma Global Ventures. I am doing this to extract 20 human beings whose lives your greed put at risk. This is a rescue mission, not an asset recovery. I laid out my terms. My team and I operate with full autonomy. You will not question my methods or my timeline. You will provide me with a full psychiatric and medical profile for every employee in that facility. I need to know who is prone to panic, who has medical conditions. Finally, you will transfer $5 million to an offshore, untraceable account, the details of which I am sending you now. This will fund the operation, transportation, equipment, and hazard pay for my men. It is non-negotiable, and not 1 cent of it will be accounted for. Rohan's face went purple with rage. $5 million? That's insane. How do we know you won't just take the money and... You don't. I cut him off, my voice like ice. But you called me, remember? The common grunt. The family disgrace. It seems you're out of options. You have 1 hour to make the transfer. If the funds are not in the account by then, the deal is off. I will walk away and you can call your friends at the State Department again. See how that works out for you. I ended the call without waiting for a response. Sarge, who had been standing in the corner, let out a low whistle. Damn, Captain. That was cold. He's had it coming for a decade, I said, feeling a grim satisfaction. It wasn't about the money. It was about control. It was about taking the power back. 58 minutes later, Jia confirmed the transfer. The money was there. The mission was a go. The final preparations were a quiet, focused ritual that settled my nerves. We laid out our gear on tarps on the floor. The sleek, black lines of our rifles, the compact weight of our sidearms, the intricate web of our load-bearing vests. Each piece of equipment was checked, double-checked, and triple-checked. Chun meticulously organized his medical supplies, a miniature trauma center in a backpack. Jia calibrated our encrypted comms and loaded tactical data onto hardened drives. Sarge moved between us, a silent inspector, his experienced eyes catching a loose strap here, a misaligned sight there. This was our sanctuary, the complex, deadly science of our profession. Here, there were no messy emotions, no family history. There was only the mission, the gear, and the man next to you. It was pure. As Chin did a final check on my vest, pulling the straps tight, he looked at me, his usual joking demeanor gone, replaced by a quiet seriousness. "You sure about this, Cap? About going back into their orbit?" I met his gaze, my answer firm and clear. "I'm not sure about them. I never will be. But I'm sure about us. That's all that matters." 24 hours later, we were in the belly of a chartered, unmarked and 12 cargo plane, flying nap of the earth over a blacked-out ocean. The roar of the engines was a deafening, bone-rattling roar. There were no seats, just webbing to hold onto. We were clad in black, our faces smeared with camo paint, oxygen masks dangling from our helmets. The red glow of the cabin lights cast us as demonic figures, specters on our way to haunt a war zone. The ramp at the back of the plane began to lower, revealing a sky full of 1,000,000 stars and the rushing, frigid wind of 30,000 feet. Below us, Zaristan was a vast, dark quilt, with only a few patches of orange light from fires burning in the distant city of Kavad. Sarge gave the signal. One by one, we shuffled to the edge of the ramp, into the roaring abyss. I was last. I took one final look at the empty, roaring space and then stepped out into nothing. The initial fall was silent, a strangely peaceful feeling of terminal velocity, the world a distant map below. Then, at the designated altitude, I pulled the cord. The canopy opened with a violent crack, and I was jerked upwards, swinging silently under a black silk wing. Below me, I could see the faint shapes of my team's canopies, all of us descending like ghosts into enemy territory. We landed hard in the rocky, scrub-covered hills, the impact jarring my bones. The mission had begun. We quickly buried our chutes under piles of rocks and began the long, silent trek toward the city lights, our only guide the GPS on my wrist and the grim determination in our hearts. We moved through the pre-dawn gloom for hours, the silence broken only by the crunch of our boots on gravel and the whisper of the wind. As the sun began to cast a weak, gray light over the horizon, we took cover in a rocky outcropping overlooking a dirt road. This was the rendezvous point. We waited. For a soldier, waiting is the hardest part. It's when the mind has time to wander, to doubt. But looking at the focused, calm faces of my team, my own doubts receded. We were a self-contained unit, an island of lethal competence in a sea of chaos. Right on schedule, a battered, dust-covered cargo truck, the kind used by local farmers, came rattling down the road and pulled to a stop. The driver's door opened, and a wiry man with a heavily creased face and wary eyes got out. It was Tarek, Jed's contact. Jed gave a low whistle, a prearranged signal, and the man's shoulders relaxed slightly. We moved down from the rocks to meet him. "You are the friends of the man who pays in American dollars?" Tarek asked in heavily accented English, his eyes flicking between the four of us, lingering on our weapons. "We are," I confirmed. "You have the supplies?" He gestured to the back of the truck. As we agreed. Clothes, water, food, and a little extra something under the floorboards. He gave us a grim smile. "You will need it. The city is a meat grinder. Kalen's dogs are on every corner. They are jumpy. They shoot first and never ask questions." He gave me a long, searching look. "This factory you are going to. The Citadel. It is a strong place, but Kalen has eyes on it. He is a collector of valuable things. Why would 4 Americans risk their lives to go into such a place?" "There are people inside," I said simply. "Our people." He nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding or maybe pity in his eyes. "People. Yes, they are always the first things to be lost in a war." He handed me a set of keys and a burner phone. "This truck is yours. The phone has 1 number in it. Mine. Call if you need a way out. But the price will be higher." He climbed into a small, rusty car parked further down the road and drove off, leaving us alone with our new, dilapidated chariot. We quickly changed out of our military gear and into the local, nondescript clothing Tarek had provided. We were now just 4 more anonymous figures in a war-torn landscape. We stashed our high-tech gear and packed only the essentials, hiding our rifles under blankets in the back of the truck. Driving into Kavad was like entering a circle of hell. The outskirts were tense and eerily quiet. But as we got closer to the center, the signs of conflict were everywhere. Burned-out cars, pockmarked buildings, and makeshift checkpoints manned by trigger-happy young men in mismatched uniforms, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. We were stopped 3 times. Each time, my heart hammered against my ribs. Sarge sat in the passenger seat, looking like a tired old merchant. Jia and Chin were in the back with our hidden gear. I did the talking. I used the broken regional dialect I had picked up on a previous deployment, explaining we were traders trying to get to a family home on the west side of the city. I used the money my father had provided, peeling off bills from a thick wad to grease the palms of the checkpoint commanders. It felt dirty, using their currency to navigate the chaos they had created, but it worked. Each time we were waved through, the young soldiers more interested in the cash than in searching our truck too closely. The final leg of the journey to the industrial zone was the worst. We had to pass through a sector controlled by Kalen's most loyal fighters. They were older, harder, and their eyes missed nothing. We navigated through a maze of back alleys and bombed-out streets, Jed guiding me with a satellite map on his tablet while I drove. The sounds of sporadic gunfire were closer now, a constant, popping drumbeat that vibrated through the soles of my feet. The smell of smoke and death was heavy in the air. Finally, we saw it. Perched on a low hill overlooking the slums, the Citadel. It was a monolith of reinforced concrete and tinted glass, a piece of the first world dropped into the third. It was surrounded by a high, electrified fence, its gates closed and silent. It looked impregnable, but I had the blueprints. I had the schematics my father had so proudly shown me on a video call years ago, boasting about its state-of-the-art security. Security that was designed to keep people out, not to facilitate a rescue from within. We found a concealed spot in a derelict warehouse a few hundred meters away to use as our staging point. From there, we observed the plant for hours. There was no movement, no sign of life, but we could see Kalen's patrols circling the perimeter like sharks. They hadn't tried to breach it yet, but they were securing the area. The clock was ticking. All right, I said. My team gathered around the hood of the truck. According to the schematics, there's a forgotten storm drain outflow on the north side, at the bottom of the embankment. It was sealed during the final phase of construction, but the plans show it connects to the plant's main service tunnels. It's our way in. Chun, you're on the breach. Yeah, once we're in, I need you to tap into their internal security network. Give us eyes and ears. Sarge, you and I have point. We find the civilians and we get them ready to move. We go in at 0200. It's time to knock on the door. The approach to the fence was a slow, agonizing crawl through the dark. We moved like shadows, using the terrain and the deep shadows cast by the plant itself for cover. We reached the base of the embankment on the north side, hidden from the view of the circling patrols. As the blueprints promised, we found the storm drain outflow, a large, circular concrete pipe sealed with a heavy iron grate, rusted shut by years of neglect. Doc, you're up, I whispered into my throat mic. Chin went to work. He didn't use explosives, that would be too loud. Instead, he used a hydraulic spreader, a powerful but quiet tool that looked like a giant pair of jaws. The metal groaned and creaked in protest. Every sound was magnified in the tense silence, sounding as loud as a gunshot to my ears. My heart pounded in time with the rhythmic pump of the hydraulics. Finally, with a low, tearing screech, the rusted bolts gave way and the grate popped free. We slipped one by one into the pitch-black tunnel. The air inside was stale and cold, the darkness absolute. We moved in single file, our night vision goggles casting the world in an eerie green glow. The tunnel was claustrophobic, slick with dampness. After about 50 meters, we reached the end, a solid steel maintenance hatch, just as the plans indicated. This was the real barrier. Chin examined the lock. It was an old, high-security mechanical system. I can do this, he whispered, pulling out a set of specialized tools. But it's not going to be quick. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. I stood guard, my rifle pointed back down the tunnel, listening. Every drip of water, every scurrying rat, sounded like approaching footsteps. Jem monitored a spectrum analyzer, sweeping for any electronic surveillance. Sarge stood by Chun, a silent, reassuring presence. Finally, with a series of soft, satisfying clicks, the lock disengaged. Chun pushed the heavy hatch open, and we slipped into the guts of the citadel. We were in a cavernous service corridor, a maze of pipes and conduits. Jia immediately found a junction box and patched his tablet into the plant's internal network. "I'm in," he breathed. "Bypassing security protocols, got it. Accessing cameras. Okay, I've got eyes." The employees are holed up in the main administrative block, in the designated emergency shelter. It's reinforced. Smart. But shit. "What is it, Jia?" I asked. "I'm picking up movement on the exterior cameras. Heavy movement. A convoy of technicals just pulled up to the main gate. It's him. It's Kalen." A cold dread washed over me. We had run out of time. "We have to move. Now," I ordered. "Jia, guide us. Fastest route." We moved quickly and quietly through the labyrinthine corridors, Jia calling out directions from the rear. We could hear the faint but unmistakable sound of heavy vehicles and shouting from outside. We reached the administrative block and found the door to the emergency shelter. It was sealed from the inside. I knocked on the steel door, a specific pattern Mr. Gupta and I had used as a secret code when I was a child. 3 quick knocks, a pause, then 2 more. There was a long silence, then the sound of heavy bolts being drawn back. The door creaked open a few inches, and a pair of terrified eyes peered out. Then, a face I knew well. Amar Gupta. He looked 10 years older, his face gaunt and gray with exhaustion. But his eyes widened in disbelief, and then shone with a desperate, brilliant hope. "Anya," he whispered, his voice cracking. "My God, it's really you." He threw the door open. We stepped inside. The room was crowded with about 20 people, men and women, American and Zaristani, their faces etched with fear and fatigue. But at the sight of us in our combat gear, a collective gasp of relief went through the room. Mr. Gupta grabbed my arms, his hands shaking. "I knew it. I told your father. I told him if anyone could get to us, it would be you. I always knew you were the strongest of them all." His words, a pure and simple validation from a man I respected more than my own father, hit me harder than any bullet could have. It was a moment of profound, unexpected grace in the heart of the chaos. But the moment was shattered by a deafening boom from outside, followed by the screech of metal. Kalen was done waiting. He was breaching the main gate. Suddenly, the plant's PA system crackled to life, a voice amplified and distorted, dripping with menace. "To the foreign thieves hiding in my factory," Kalen's voice boomed. "This is your only warning. You are trespassing. Surrender now, and I may be merciful. Resist, and I will burn this place to the ground with you inside it." The civilians whimpered, huddling closer together. I looked at my team. Our quiet infiltration had just turned into a siege. "All right," I said, my voice calm and steady, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "New plan." The standoff was a battle of wills played out over a loudspeaker. Kalen had us surrounded, his men swarming the perimeter. But we were inside his prize, and he didn't know our numbers or our capabilities. That uncertainty was our only weapon. While he postured and threatened, we worked. "Jia, talk to me about sabotage," I said into my mic as I moved to the shelter's comms panel. "What can we break that will cause the most chaos?" Jia's fingers were a blur on his tablet. "This place is a chemical processing plant, CAP. It's a giant, high-tech bomb if you know which buttons to push. I can overload the primary coolant system for the reaction chambers. It won't cause a massive explosion, but it'll trigger a cascade failure. Emergency steam vents, chemical alarms, lockdown protocols. It'll be a goddamn circus. It'll give us the cover we need." "Do it," I ordered. "Sarge, Chun, we need an alternate exit. The front door is a no-go." Sarge was already studying the schematics on his own tablet. "Here," he said, pointing. "Service railway. On the west side of the plant, used for transporting waste material. It leads out through a tunnel, comes out a half-click away. It's our best shot. Get the civilians ready," I told them. "Keep them quiet and keep them moving." I opened a channel on the main comms panel, using a voice modulator to disguise my voice. "This is the facility manager." I broadcast, my voice deep and anonymous, to the commander of the armed group outside. "This plant contains highly volatile materials. One stray bullet in the wrong place could cause a chemical release that would poison this entire valley for a generation. I am willing to negotiate a peaceful surrender of the facility. Kalen's laugh crackled over the PA. You are in no position to negotiate. You will open the doors and surrender my factory and the foreign engineers inside. The engineers are non-negotiable, I countered, playing for time. They are civilian contractors. Let them go, and I will initiate the safe shutdown sequence and hand the facility over to you intact. A gesture of goodwill. I do not need your goodwill, he roared. I take what I want. The roar was followed by the sound of sustained, heavy machine gun fire as his men began blasting away at the administrative block's main entrance. The battle had started. "Jia now," I yelled. On it, cap overload sequence initiated. We've got about 90 seconds until showtime. The firefight was intense. Kalen's men were undisciplined, but numerous. They poured fire at our position, the bullets ricocheting off the reinforced walls. We didn't waste ammunition. Sarge, Chun, and I took up positions at the reinforced windows, laying down precise, controlled bursts of fire, forcing them to keep their heads down. The civilians were terrified, huddled behind us, but Mr. Gupta was a rock, keeping them calm, whispering reassurances. Then the chaos began. A low hum deep within the plant began to rise in pitch, becoming a piercing shriek. Red emergency lights began to flash, bathing the corridors in a hellish strobe. A klaxon alarm blared, a deafening, rhythmic pulse. 30 seconds. Jia yelled over the din. Massive plumes of white steam erupted from vents in the ceiling, hissing and obscuring everything. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into the flashing red emergency lighting. This was our chance. Go, 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 Sarge bellowed, herding the frightened civilians toward the service corridor. We fell back under the cover of the steam and chaos, moving as a single unit, forming a protective cocoon around the employees. The plant was turning against its new masters. Kalen's men, disoriented by the alarms and the steam, began firing wildly. We reached the service railway platform. An old, rust-covered electric rail car sat on the tracks. Jia hot-wired it in seconds while Chun and Sarge loaded the civilians aboard. I took up a rear-guard position, watching our back trail. I could see the silhouettes of Kalen's men moving through the steam, shouting in confusion and anger. Before I boarded the car, I took out a small thermite charge and slapped it onto the main control panel for the core processing unit, the heart of the plant, the single most valuable piece of equipment. It wasn't part of the plan, but it felt right. A final defiant act. This mission was about lives, not assets. Everyone on. I yelled. We're good, Cap. Let's go. Sarge confirmed. I jumped onto the moving car as it lurched forward, plunging into the darkness of the exit tunnel. As we sped away, I triggered the thermite charge. There was no sound, just a brilliant, silent flash of white light from the corridor behind us, hot enough to melt steel. The citadel, my father's crown jewel, was now just a hollow, useless shell. We had saved the people, but the Empire had just taken a mortal wound. I felt nothing but a profound sense of relief. The journey out of Zaristan was a long, slow-motion nightmare. The rail car took us to the tunnel's exit on the far side of the hill, a kilometer away from the chaos we'd unleashed at the plant. Tark was there as promised with 2 large, covered trucks. He took one look at the 20 pale, terrified faces of the civilians and the grim, determined faces of my team, and simply nodded, asking no questions. The price had already been paid. The main roads east are crawling with Kalen's men, he said, handing me a new burner phone. He will be furious. He will be looking for you. Your only chance is the old mountain pass to the south. It is treacherous but less traveled. We split the civilians between the 2 trucks, lying flat on the floor, covered with tarps and empty crates. My team and I were in the lead truck, with me driving again. The next 18 hours were a blur of tension and exhaustion. The mountain pass was barely a road, a winding dirt track carved into the side of a cliff. Every few miles, we'd encounter a makeshift checkpoint manned by various rebel factions, none of them loyal to Kalen, all of them unpredictable. At one checkpoint, a young soldier, no older than 16, with an ancient rifle and fear in his eyes, insisted on searching the back of the truck. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sarge sat beside me, his hand resting near the butt of his concealed sidearm. I got out of the truck and spoke to the boy's commander, a weary-looking older man. I didn't offer a bribe at first. I offered him 2 large containers of clean drinking water and a box of medical supplies from Chen's kit. I spoke to him about his village, about his family. I treated him like a man, not an obstacle. He stared at me for a long moment, then at the water, and finally gave a curt nod to the young soldier. The boy looked into the back of our truck, his eyes sweeping over the tarps that hid 20 lives, and then looked back at his commander. The commander gave a slight shake of his head. The boy slammed the truck door shut. "They are clear," he mumbled. We were waved through. It was a small victory, a moment of shared humanity in an ocean of brutality. We finally crossed the unmarked border into the neighboring, more stable country just after dawn. We drove for another 2 hours until we reached the prearranged safe house, a secluded farmhouse owned by one of Tarek's distant cousins. The moment I turned off the engine, the silence was absolute. We had made it. The relief was so total, so overwhelming, that it felt like a physical weight lifting off my shoulders. The employees stumbled out of the trucks, weeping, hugging each other, breathing in the clean air of freedom. Mr. Gupta, looking utterly spent but alive, came over to me. He took both my hands in his. "Your father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He measured his success in stock prices and acquisitions. He valued the wrong things, Anya. He spent his life looking at balance sheets. He should have been looking at you. Later that day, after coordinating with a discreet contact at the American embassy in this new country to arrange for the civilians' extraction, I stood on a hill overlooking the peaceful valley and made the call. My father picked up on the first ring. "Anya, what's the status? We heard reports, a fire at the plant. We feared the worst." His voice was a jumble of anxiety and hope. "The people are safe," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "All 20 of them. They're at the embassy. They'll be home soon." There was a beat of silence, and then, "And the assets? The facility? The equipment? What's the damage?" I looked out at the tranquil green valley, a world away from the fire and smoke of Kavad. "The plant," I said slowly, letting the words land with the weight they deserved, "is a total loss. I had to make a choice. I chose the lives you were willing to risk." Stunned silence. I could hear his sharp intake of breath. Then Rohan's voice, angry and incredulous, came on the line. "You destroyed it. You deliberately destroyed it? Do you have any idea what that plant was worth? You've ruined us." A strange, calm clarity settled over me. The last vestiges of the hurt little girl, the one who just wanted her father's approval, finally vanished. "I know exactly what it was worth, Rohan," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. "And I know what 20 human lives are worth. It seems we have different accounting methods. My work is done. Don't contact me again." I ended the call and blocked the number. The cord was cut, this time by me. That evening, my team and I sat on the porch of the farmhouse, cleaning our weapons, the familiar ritual a comforting balm. Sarge handed me a cup of strong, sweet coffee. "You did good, Captain," he said, his voice full of quiet pride. "You did the right thing." Jia held up his tablet. On the screen was an international news report. "Warlord faction blamed for destruction of foreign-owned plant in Enlisting," the headline read. The article detailed how Kalen's forces had apparently botched their attempt to seize the citadel, causing a catastrophic industrial fire. We were ghosts. We had never been there. He grinned. "Looks like Kalen's having a bad week." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. These men were my family. This quiet, shared understanding was my home. I had walked through fire, not for the family that had abandoned me, but for the one that had stood by me, and I had never felt more whole. Months passed. The world moved on. The civil war in Enlisting raged on, a distant headline. I was back in the States, taking some much-needed leave. My apartment was small, simple, and felt more like home than the mansion I grew up in ever did. One afternoon, a package arrived. It was from Amar Gupta. Inside was a beautiful, old, leather-bound edition of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, the kind of book he used to give me in secret. Tucked inside was a letter. He wrote about how the other rescued employees were all doing, how they were rebuilding their lives. He told me they had taken up a collection, not as a payment, but as a thank you. They had made a large donation in my full name, Captain Anya Sharma, to a charity that supported the families of fallen Special Operations soldiers. Reading that, seeing my name attached to an act of such quiet goodness was a form of validation so pure and profound it brought tears to my eyes. This was the currency that mattered. Not dollars, but gratitude. Not assets, but lives. A week later, I received an email from my father's personal assistant, formally requesting a meeting. Against my better judgment, driven by a flicker of morbid curiosity, I agreed. We met in a neutral space, a quiet, upscale cafe halfway between my world and theirs. They looked different, smaller, defeated. The loss of the Zaristan plant had been a catastrophic blow to Sharma Global Ventures, and the strain showed on their faces. My father spoke first, his voice lacking its old, booming confidence. Anya, he began, we were wrong. About everything. About you. We see that now. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. What you did, it was remarkable. We were foolish. Rohan, looking humbled for the first time in his life, chimed in. We want to make things right. We want you to come home. To the company. We're creating a new position. Head of Global Security. You could write your own ticket. Name your price. We need you. And there it was. Not a real apology. Not an admission of the pain they had caused. It was a job offer. It was another attempt to put me in a box, to commodify my skills, to use the very person they had created to patch the holes in their sinking ship. They hadn't changed. They had just run out of other options. I took a slow sip of my coffee, looked at these two men who share my DNA but not my soul, and I felt nothing but a calm, detached pity. Thank you for the offer, I said, my voice gentle but firm. But I already have a job, and I already have a family. They wear the same uniform I do. I placed my cup down on the saucer with a soft click. I'm not a tool for you to use when it's convenient, and I'm not a problem for you to solve. I am a soldier. I stood up. I wish you well with the company. Truly. But my business with you, with all of this, is concluded. I turned and walked out of the cafe, out into the bright sunshine, and I didn't look back. I was finally, irrevocably, free. They never truly understood the choice I made all those years ago. They saw it as a rejection of their world of money, power, and influence. But I wasn't rejecting anything. I was choosing something. I chose a world where your worth isn't measured by your net worth, but by your integrity. A world where value is calculated in loyalty, in courage, and in the person who has your back when you're deep in the darkness. They wanted me to spend my life managing their assets. I chose to spend my life protecting America's greatest one, its people. That decision to walk away from them for the final time, in that quiet cafe, was in many ways harder than any mission I have ever been on. It was the final battle in a war that had been raging inside me for more than a decade. But it was the one that finally, truly, brought me home to myself. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have taken the job, or would you have walked away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm always fascinated by the different paths people would choose. And if you've ever had to make a hard choice between who you are and who your family expected you to be, I encourage you to share your story if you feel comfortable. You never know who you might help by doing so. Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you. And please subscribe for more stories about finding your own way. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey and for listening. Remember, sometimes the most important borders you will ever defend are the ones that protect your own soul. Be well and be strong.